News from No Man's Land, written and read by John Simpson. In the ears of a long-serving BBC lifer, allowed out on parole, the pronoun I always has a mildly indecent feeling to it. "That is the one word that never appears in the BBC Reporter's Dictionary," said one of my stuffier editors to me in 1969. It faintly crossed my mind to use one or two other words to him which weren't in the dictionary either, but instead I nodded ingratiatingly. And the older I get, the more I find I agree with him. In a world where everyone seems to be shouting at you and trying to manipulate your emotions and thoughts, the calmer, less egoistic tone seems to come across better. That, at any rate, is what I tell myself, yet I don't think I've ever written the word I so often as I have in the series of 3 autobiographical books, which I've clumped together under the title Out to the Undiscovered Ends. The first, an account of my life, the second, about my travels, and this, a look at the business of broadcasting international news. It still feels faintly immoral, somehow. I first started planning this book in the summer of 2001, when it would have focused on the fall of Slobodan Milosevic. Soon afterwards, though, the attack on the Twin Towers in New York and the Pentagon in Washington took place, and I found myself deeply involved in the BBC's coverage of the war in Afghanistan. As a way of illustrating how we cover news events for television nowadays, I've gone into some detail about the struggle which led up to our reporting of the fall of Kabul in November 2001, one of the more exciting events which I've been fortunate enough to witness. The fall of Kabul marked the point at which the BBC emerged finally as the dominant force in international television broadcasting. Tuesday, 13th of November 2001. The city lay below us, as vulnerable as an oyster on the half-shell. Kabul, at last. Standing there in the chilly dawn, with my flak jacket weighing heavily on me, I couldn't take my eyes off it. For the past 3 months I'd been directing almost every thought, every effort to getting back there. I'd last been in the city in September, just before the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Then, on the 9th of September, the Taliban ordered me out, and I left. It wasn't the finest decision I've ever made. Having been in the right place and left it unnecessarily, I felt I had something to prove. Now, after all this waiting, Kabul was only a short walk away. But there was a problem. The Northern Alliance army, which we'd travelled with, had been ordered to stop there on the outskirts of the city. It was clear to me we'd have to disobey these orders and head down into Kabul even though it was still occupied by the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Would my BBC companions come with me? After living alongside them for so many weeks, I felt pretty certain they would. A tough-looking Northern Alliance soldier stood in the roadway with a red scarf tied round his head and an RPG-7 rocket grenade launcher cradled in his arms. He had orders not to let anyone pass. And yet he wasn't the main obstacle. That was the man in charge. General Gul Haider was a pleasant, ebullient man with a rolling walk like a sailor going down a village street. He'd probably had the walk even before he lost his leg to a landmine. When the mad dash of the Northern Alliance to the gates of Kabul was halted, we filmed him haranguing his men, warning that if any of them headed into Kabul, he'd kill them. But we weren't Gul Haider's men. We were free agents, and all we had to do was to persuade him to let us pass. There were 8 of us altogether. We'd lived rough for an entire month in a dirty, cold, shattered building close to the front line, which had been used for years as a public latrine. To be here now represented our reward for all that. A small red car came screaming up the hill from the direction of Kabul. It had taken several bullets, in the doors, through the roof. It stopped close to us, and a familiar head poked through the window. Haji Bari, the Northern Alliance commander, who'd been our landlord throughout the previous month.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?